I'm going to put something in just as a moderator, and I used to be editor over at the Advocate, and I know I'm president over at City Club, where we just did a white paper on cluster housing as potential solution. I think that's on our website at City Club. But at the Advocate, if we do a story that at all indicates that we think a development may be a good idea, we will get a slew of email. And the Facebook comments, there's like 2 people we know we're going to hear from at book length. So just, when we say no to building housing, we are part of that problem at times. And we need to recognize when it's time to say yes in my backyard as well as no.
Yes.
Moderator, I'm going to overstep a little bit, stay in the opinion there. Okay, so I see that you're raising your hand.
I've got a whole thing planned out. So
good.
So you can put your hand down as it's started.
She sees you. Excellent. And then Ms. Whitaker, I'm going to take a little bit.
Of you 4, how have any of you been homeless for any length of time? Of you 4? None of you. Well, there's something that's a lot of people
When
in
you
this
say,
room.
do you mean the panelist or me included?
No, you too. Have you lived as a homeless person?
Yeah.
You have.
Yeah.
For how long?
Just about a year. It was voluntary, however.
You know, a long time ago.
Yeah, long time ago. Got out of school. Just
Oh.
wanted to hitchhike around.
But the other thing I want to talk about is a lot of people in here could help themselves because they're actually encouraging bad behavior out there. And you don't encourage bad behavior, you discourage it. Whether a person has bad body odor, or whether he's drunk, or whether he's coming down the street shouting incoherently, or whatever it is. You don't embrace them. You don't love them. I know what I do to them. I say, get away from me until you can be sane. Then you can be around me. I can talk to people. I can help people. And you wouldn't believe how many homeless people instantly become sane. So you can stop encouraging bad behavior. You don't. You can try to be diplomatic in ending it, but that would help your situation.
Okay, so any panelists have a comment for that? Or? Okay. Anybody else have a comment for that?
Yes, I do.
Okay, Sammy. So Sammy, and I will never be able to pronounce your last name correctly. Sammy is on 509J School Board. He's been a candidate for state rep, and take it away, Sam.
Thanks. I have something to say. I don't want to bring my faith many times, but this is the time where I say, whatever you believe in, a religion or any system, I think we are better together when we take people in. Yes, some people could do something wrong, and you want to tell them, learn your lesson. But the language you say, and I wish the panelists would say, no, this is not our values. We take people in. If they do a mistake, we help them. If they do a mistake, we tell them how to make it better. So I want to be clear, whether it is we want to put people in a peaceful place that could be flooded in someday, I'm not sure if that's peaceful. If we say people should be punished because of options or decisions that they did not make. And I have a story that I believe someone did not commit a mistake to be homeless. I met him one day before the city council was considering the exclusion zone. He was living in downtown, in a tent. His wife is in her 3rd trimester. I couldn't tell. She missed her meal. He is a veteran. He's homeless, not because of his guilt, because we sent him somewhere to fight for us, and now he's back, limping. When it started raining on Sunday, he was holding the food that someone with me gave it to him, rather than me finding out how I can help. I was just theorizing. How can we help them? 2nd Street, 3rd Street. The person with me thought about how she can take them in, giving them food. And he was limping with the rain, making sure that he can reach home, and he called it home, his tent, with his wife. I'm rambling. Do you know why? Because I believe we need to state our values. Honestly, when I heard that proposal, here's my thinking process. Wow, $4 million, you can do a lot with it. Northtown, this is interesting. But then I gave myself a self-check. Are we going to follow the money? Are we going to follow what looks fancy? Or are we going to ask ourselves first, what is our intent out of this? To take people in or to exclude them out? I believe, respectfully, I believe you want to, thank you. We want to take you in. I know I don't want to punish anyone out of,
Okay,
Somebody's
and
drunk or whatever, you know, I don't want them around.
so I'm gonna let Ms. Beiswanger get to the next person, and thank you for sharing that, Sammy, and thank you for sharing as well.
You know, any decision you come to as a governing official, there's going to be two sides, so that's a given. You vote for apple pie and someone wants peach pie, that's fine. But I think we could all agree that the process of coming to that decision is important. And so my concern in all this was seeing how this played out, the process of this played out at the county level, where Commissioner Shuster made comments about a pending matter on her personal Facebook page. Then we had a meeting with an agenda that was so vague as to be deceptive. No one knew that this was going to be discussed. It was discussed, but only after everyone left the meeting except the 3 commissioners and the county administrator. Then you didn't vote on it, but you just came to consensus. Now, whether we all agree by vote or consensus that we're going to go to a movie or get a sandwich, the outcome is the same. We made a decision. So the whole process was very concerning to me. It was a process that was handled in a way that will destroy trust in the community. So I'm curious about how are you going to rebuild that trust in the community in the decision-making process?
Where's the transparency?
So I was concerned because of this July 1st deadline, that they were ready to move into the shelter. There hadn't been any discussion in the community, and so I put a target on my back. I posted those notices on Facebook just to get a rise out of the community, and it did. And so there would not be any discussion right now. It would be happening in a couple days without this discussion, for better or worse. As far as process, the $60,000 was never in our budget. It was we were looking to match the city's $60,000 contribution, and we agreed to do that last year, and we found dollars in our, from different places in our budget, and this year we were doing the same. It was a gift. It wasn't part of our budget. It wasn't part of the process. It was just something we were going to do to support the community. So and we didn't vote on it, and we haven't voted on it because we haven't decided what we're going to do. If the site is at a different spot than the 2nd Street, and we did that intentionally just to slow down the conversation.
So I would like to take a point to disagree on some of that statement. I'm not going to discuss how the commissioners run their meetings, but with the statement made that there was no discussion going on, I don't know how many of you were at the July 4th Budget Commission meeting we had. June 4th, excuse me, thank you. Just to start, and that was after a lot of discussion that had been going on. One of the things that has moved forward and moved forward more quickly, I credit part of it to being what Commissioner Schuster brought forward, but also some of what who she's working with, was the possibility of alternatives. But that's not to say there wasn't public process and wasn't public discussion. To me, the key thing that changed here was if there are alternatives, that there are people who are seriously working and coming up with alternatives so that they can be described and evaluated.
Shawn, do you have any input on that? Oh.
So, being in the roughly awkward position of sitting here with 2 of the many people who are probably my boss, let me just say that I disagree with the county's decision. I don't believe that the urgency required that decision, but I respect the fact that it is within their purview to make that decision. I believe that they are initiating a process to gain more public input now. And I think I think that process needs to go forward, and the input will be received and the proposals brought forward, and they can make their decision. It's unfortunate, I think, how it happened, but now we're at a little further down the road, and we can reset and have some more public process around this and see what happens.
Next questioner.
I have a question and a comment. My comment is that I'm worried about delay tactics and bait and switch. My question is about this year's cold winter shelter. And the question I have for you is, are we discussing where to put a shelter, or are we discussing whether the city and county will provide funding for the shelter? Since it seems to me that nonprofit businesses have the right to contract with landlords to place their services where they're zoned appropriately. And I've not heard anything that is different from that. So is it just a funding decision rather than a location decision that's being discussed here?
So to answer that from the city perspective, that's part of where when I was describing the process, I was some vague, because exactly the point you're making is right now we have 3 organizations who are working with a landlord on a 2nd Street site that, unless there's some more details in the actual permit side of things of moving in there, it's a permitted use. It is something that seems to be a 4-way agreement, or two-way agreements, however you want to describe it. So you're exactly right, and that was what I commented earlier, that we're in a situation where I don't think any of us want government, beyond the regulations that we have put in place, to be then dictating what goes into what building. I remember this occurring 5 or 6 years ago, where Walmart was coming to town, and there were people very upset about that, because for whatever number of reasons. But that was nothing that we could do and should be trying to do anything about. Now that said, I am also fostering the discussion that if there is an alternative for something that has attributes that are better, because there are difficulties with the 2nd Street site, there's conflict around it, there's no denying that. There are those who are opposed to it, there are those who are very opposed to it. And so if my comments have been, all right, come up with an alternative and then present it. So this is where City Council, yes, there's a funding decision the City Council will make, and that's part of it, but that won't necessarily keep something from occurring if the funding doesn't occur. The second part is, however, perhaps the City Council evaluation process can inform the community, and second, perhaps City Council has the ability with 9 councilors from different parts of town to take on the very hard issue of evaluating the trade-offs that I think Maggie Cooper identified earlier. And I think definitely all these sites have drawbacks and pluses. And I'll confess to somewhat setting up City Council to deal with the hard decision to be made here if they wish to make a decision about what are they going to opine as a legislative body on a particular location.
This brings me to a question. I know of 3 sites being considered. One is in North, one is Flomacher, and the other one is 2nd Street. As to the North, what about zoning for that? Are there any problems with permitted uses for that site?
You're asking me a question about a proposal that I've heard parts of and I have treated as not accepted and not received until it's a complete proposal.
So, are you aware if there are permitted uses, Commissioner Shuster?
Are you 6? I believe the zoning is all right, but again, it has to be vetted through the community development.
Okay, all right. And what about Flomacher? What about the zoning for that? And that's really up in the air, right?
Well, we've already had that discussion, and there are disagreements about what it is, and I believe we'll have more of that.
City attorney will be weighing in on
part of that on parks, and then the other question is between the proposer and Lynn County. I mean, I've seen a series of articles, I've seen a series of emails. I'm not sure how the timing goes with all of those, and I'm hoping we can get a clearer picture on a timeline and have something that makes more sense come Tuesday, so
Now, when you say
councils can understand.
When you say parks, what you're referring to is the community passed a measure, I think last cycle, that Parks and Rec would need to go to the community for a vote, a ballot measure if they want to change use on any parkland.
That is exactly right. That was a charter amendment, so that's now part of the city charter, though the point has been made in emails to council and staff that that doesn't apply to this site because it's been industrial for 30 years or whatever and was not part of the park. And I'm not delving into and offering an opinion one way or the other on that. I'm just saying that has to get understood, and I don't know how it's going to get clarified, and the city attorney has some work to do there before.
So, Ms. Cooper, I'll give you about 30 seconds to reply to that.
I didn't actually need that much. I received an email from Catherine which said that in the mid-90s, the city of Corvallis made a request to Lynn County to change the status of the Flow Matcher site from industrial to park, and that request was denied, and it hasn't been changed since then.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Beiswinger, next questioner.
Okay.
Yes, hello, I'd just like to say I've lived in Corvallis since 1959. Gone through the whole school system, including OSU, own my own home, and business, and I'll tell you, Corvallis is unmatched for its bus system, the bike paths, the parks, the benign criminal class even, and the supermarkets. And if I appreciate this, it's going to attract and hold homeless people because they very much appreciate it. Now, in the last 10 years, I've been legally disabled. Owning a large home, I opened my home to many homeless people. And not only am I rather impressed with these people, but I couldn't do without them. I mean, I couldn't get the work done. I couldn't have kept the house. That's all there is to it. And the general problems, the drug thing has been very, very minor because most of these people are too poor to afford hard drugs and be hardcore drug addicts. The only problem I've had have been a few of them with stuff accumulation. They like to go out and bring home divans and stuff that are free or whatnot. But my impression is this on the sites we're talking about. I like the idea of the 2nd Street site for temporary site, simply because it's probably the area of highest tolerance to the homeless, because that area deals with the welfare people and the unemployed and stuff. And it's probably more friendly there than anywhere else in town. As far as the flow market goes, most of the homeless people I know, they're not like in California where they want to get in people's faces and demand money. They want to just
give you about 20 more seconds.
They just want to go their own way, collect hands, whatever for money, but I think flow market is good with hard shelter as well as opening Allenburg as a campsite, a controlled campsite. And that's my 2 cents worth.
Any response? We don't have to respond to anything. Okay. Next questioner, Ms. Beiswinger.
I have a couple of comments. I'm Sarah Power, and I have been the director of the Cold Weather Women's Shelter for 5 years. And when we opened the women's shelter at the United Methodist Church, it was temporary. We were working with Corvallis Housing First to provide the same sort of multi-service building and property that is now being discussed for 2nd Street. This is the model, the best practices model for helping homeless folks get their lives together, get some stability, and improve themselves as much as live their best life. That's what this kind of model works for. Again, as we shut up the women's shelter, it was intended to be temporary. We thought we would be housing 1 or 2 years until we got this shelter built that would house men and women, have the stone soup and the drop-in center in the basement. That got shut down by some wealthy folks in town who did not like the idea of having the shelter in their neighborhood. And I'm not going to go into details on that. However, in all of these conversations about shelter, everyone is forgetting the women. The women need shelter too. The United Methodist Church has done this for 5 years, which is much longer than we expected to do it. Right now, in the transition period for the drop-in center is without a home as of July 1st. So they are going to be having temporary part-time drop-in center in the United Methodist Church. Again, but there are other places that can help with this. And personally, the other big point I have is that the women's shelter has been in 3 different places. It was out on 35th Street for a while. Then it was way north on, we used to call it the Naz Dome. If you've lived here long enough, you know what that is. But the Dome Church out on 99. And the number of women that were served in those shelters, because they were hard to get at, you had to catch the right bus at the right time, exactly the right time, or you couldn't get there. The number of women that were served there.
I can give you around 30 more seconds.
Okay. There was an average of three women per night in those locations. Since we are located in an area that's easy to get to, we're accessible, as is the 2nd Street property, we have increased the number of women. The first year we had 8 women average a night. We've upped that. So this last year we had about 10. The year before we had 12 women a night average. So there is a need here, and having a location that's easy to get to is so essential, and that's accessible, truly accessible to everyone.
So my first response was to say, offer bunches of appreciation to the United Methodist Church for both what it's done for women's shelter and stepping up to help the drop-in center in this interim period, and to the gentleman in the back to be an example of what can be done and how people can productively, on their own, help with those that are homeless.
Shawn.
Well, I'm happy to make a comment if you'd like.
That'd be great.
Yeah, I think that Sarah is right. I mean, we often, when I started this job a couple of years ago, one of the things I was grateful for is that we don't talk much about the women's shelter, because that means it's not going to come under fire, right? I knew how much trouble there had been around the women's shelter, but I am concerned about the long-term future of the women's shelter and where it's going to be housed. I agree that part of the value of having a more central location is that it makes it easier for the people that need to get there to get service. And I think that the idea of bringing together multiple services in a central location is something that makes a lot of sense. It's best practice. I think it's a different clientele, but I think that the model at COI is actually along that line of having mental health care and physical health care and addiction services and transitional and emergency shelter, all these things. Trying to integrate that and deliver it in an efficient way and in a coordinated way is one of the ways that makes it work for people. And so whatever location it's in, you could say, well, whatever location it's in, it doesn't really matter, right? If you build it, they will come. But the reality is, it does matter where you put it. It's going to make a difference in the neighborhood, definitely, but it's also it can make a positive impact in that neighborhood by creating a better service point, a better way to actually reach those folks. And I think that's key. To the person who spoke earlier about, don't tolerate those behaviors, I think setting expectations for behavior is important, but I think that it has to be done in a way that says, in talking with you about your behavior, we're recognizing you as a member of this community. And we're not shunning you, we're not rejecting you, we're not pushing you away. You're part of this community, and if you're going to be part of this community, let's talk about what that means. Let's talk about what you can expect from us and what we would like to expect from you. And let's talk about the challenges that you might be facing in your life that make actually reaching those kinds of behavioral standards a challenge for you, right? What happened? What is causing you the pain and suffering that is actually making you self-medicate, right? Is it physical pain, right? If you look at the studies of chronic pain among the homeless, it is endemic. It is one of the most common challenges among the homeless. But if you present at an emergency room as a homeless individual, and say that I've got pain, even if it's pain that might be treated with neuropathic drugs, not opioids, you're going to be seen as drug seeking. They will reject you because they'll think that you're there for opioids. And so pains like diabetic neuropathy, right? Pains that are caused by being on your feet all day, pains that are part of the experience of living on the street are often sent away from legitimate treatment. That's not right. I think we can do better.
I'm going to ask you to weigh in a minute, but I also want to just comment. Same emergency room, if you've got somebody presenting with any kind of psychotic symptoms, if the person presenting has had any drug use in their recent past, they're going to dump them in a pool of Ativan and straight up the minute he's stable. And the reality of it is, they may find out that was a psychotic break, and you don't know what's going to happen in that interim. And so currently, I think our mental health system is broken at the emergency room level, at a level that should be unacceptable to everybody here, I'm hoping. Okay, Ms. Shuster.
Oh, a few things. I think location matters, but if we have some folks willing to build and support this shelter at a site that has outdoor opportunities for folks, that should be considered. Are those community members not part of this community? I mean, people are acting like the business owners are bad people, and they're literally just trying to help solve the problem. And there would be medical services in this facility. There would be everything anyone would need, and if the need goes away.
Okay, whoa. Okay, if you want the mic.